Welcome to the Instinctive Influencers podcast, a show where influence becomes one of your tools for success. Now, here are your hosts, Brian Weber and Ed Haley.
Hi, I'm Brian.
And I am James.
James, man, I'm so glad we got rid of that Ed guy. He was so trash the past
He was
100-something
horrible,
episodes.
man.
Horrible.
What a just
personality.
No upbringing, just terrible dude.
Yeah. Man, I'm telling you. Hey, how you doing, brother? You look great. You look wonderful.
I'm trying, man. Busy. Yeah, it's getting ready to warm up, man. I got like 2 days of rain to start the week, and then I can start riding the bike. And the way prices are at the gas pumps, I need to ride the bike.
Hey, funny thing. So, my shoulder went down. I was driving back and forth to school, because I didn't want to have to carry my backpack on my, but now I can carry a backpack and everything like that. And the past week and a half, I've been walking. It's not even like a half.
I thought you were still doing the walks with the wife. I thought that's what those walks were.
No. That we still do that, right? So
okay.
we walk the kid to school, drop them off, and then we complete a loop that's just under 2 miles. Like, it irks me every time we do it. I'm like,
you could walk a little farther.
I could, but I don't.
Just walk. I would 100%. I'm telling you, yesterday I did a bike ride and I came in, I was going to be at like 31.6.
Right.
Yeah. I rode around my block until I got to 32 on the dot. I was like, I'm not doing 0.6. So,
well, I thought it was funny because I watched your the relive thing that you put on Facebook. Yeah. And I think you put on Instagram also. And it was like some of the turn, like I'm watching and I'm thinking, did he get lost? And then realize he got lost and he had to turn around and go back. Like, it was so funny watching it.
I gotta tell you. So I'm going and I'm using Google and I have these Bose sunglasses, right?
I have them.
Yeah, so I have those on so that I can hear the traffic and be safe.
Yeah, exactly.
So I'm following this thing, and next thing you know, she's like, slight left, and I'm like, that's a dirt trail going up to the train track. Okay, so I go up there, and I'm like, where is this thing taking me? So I just bang a right, and there's like a, like a utility trail along the train tracks, and I'm going. I said, well, I should have a cut in back to the, to the community soon. Any minute now, I should have this cut in. That cut in has to be around here somewhere. And then finally I was like, there's no cut in, turn around, go back. So what it was is there is the train tracks, right? There's a walkway underneath. And I was supposed to go through the walkway under the train tracks, pop back out by the train station and continue my ride. I didn't see it. So I was like, the only turn I can make is into this parking lot or up this path. So yes, there was 2 times when I just like, I turned around because I got lost. I enjoy. I don't know about you, Brian. When I ride the bike, especially if I had the mountain bike, because I have more, access to more areas. I love getting lost when I ride a bike.
I don't mind. I don't personally mind. Me, because if anything, I'm gonna just go back the way I came. But
worst case scenario.
I just don't like to get lost in the wrong part of town. That's all. You know what I mean? So,
so
they take my bike and my shoes and everything else. So
I do worry about. Well, they're gonna have a hard time catching me on that bike right now. So I'm getting fast. I really thought it was gonna be super sore. That's the longest ride I've had in a while outdoors, and I felt great. I could have rode this morning. I wouldn't have rode fast, but I could have rode. Yeah, a couple of hill climbs and not bad for an old man. I mean, I'll be 50 in a couple months.
And then, that's something that we constantly, we've talked about a lot about, and I think it goes along the lines too of being an influencer and I'm not saying like, not an internet influencer, like one of those fake, those fake people who just try to get money because they're influencing people to buy products. Yeah. I'm talking about like somebody who's a leader, if you're out there doing this stuff to keep yourself healthy and young, and you expect it of the people, you're at least doing it, and you can expect it from them. You can't expect people to do things that you're not willing to do. And I mean, we're not spring chickens, Ed. We're not running fast like we did when we were younger or anything, you know.
Oh
I
yeah,
mean,
no.
I just it doesn't work that way anymore, you know. And you find, I was just having this conversation with my buddy yesterday. So we did this little a little over 10.5 mile hike up to a
Beautiful
place called
pictures.
up to Mundy's Gap. Man, Mundy's
Yep.
Gap is pretty cool. In about 2 weeks, I'm going to do the rest of the trek that takes you all the way to the Franklin Peak. It's about 13.3 miles. So, but I was having the trip back down, and I was mentioning to him, like, you know, I like doing a lot, like, you know, you don't like it. I know you don't like CrossFit, but I like the endurance of things, right? I'm starting to really enjoy the endurance running. I enjoy the endurance cycling or mountain biking. And then I told myself, like, I have a fully stocked gym downstairs that I can use for any. I want to transition from like that power. I still want a little bit of power, but I want to be able to do more of the endurance, you know, like to be able to, you know, my body to last in a certain way.
Yeah.
There's
No, I
no
understand.
need. There's no need for me to deadlift 400 pounds. Like there really isn't.
There is, but okay. No. I actually, but
There isn't though. You know,
I've slowed down on the heavy strength training stuff myself as I approach this next.
But strength training is important.
So I not completely eliminate it, but I have like like you said. Listen, the last few times that I've put 350 plus pounds on my back and tried to squat it, I've pulled something in my thigh, right? And I look at the second and third order effects of that is now I can't cycle.
Yeah.
Right. Now I'm getting where I can't really, it's uncomfortable to walk the dog around the corner when I first do it. So I had to look at those things. And this is like the last 6 months or so that I and that's why I started cycling indoors so much. And that's why no cycling in January, mind you, but I'm at about 550 miles for the year.
Nice.
Cycling. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. But yeah. And then running, I was doing the running for a bit. And I still want to do it, but I've been getting these treatments in my ankle, and I'm like, let them do their thing first, and then we'll come back to that. But cycling it's zen. It is like you get out there, and it's just you and the bike. Especially here, there's so many trails here.
Yeah.
So you get out on these trails, man, and you're just like taking in the scenery, and you're like breathing, and sometimes I don't put any music on, I don't put anything on, I just go, and it's a zen moment. It's a big thing for me to help me get my mind right.
It is.
So yeah,
I think we did a show about releasing those mental chemicals to help make your life better. Endorphins are one of them. That's what you did. So hey, heck yeah, man. All right, Ed.
All right.
we had a great conversation there, and it had to do a lot of like basically getting out of yourself and doing things, and then having realizations, right? We realize things, and we're like, hey, we're not as strong as we used to be. We got to change things up. I mean, by the way, I'm at 322 on the miles, so I got to play catch up with you. No, we're getting into a story here. We're jumping back into our leadership lessons from history, and this one we're going into some World War I stuff because we had to bounce back. We jumped forward because 101, we had to do it on episode 101. We're jumping backwards. Yeah, I mean, come on, dude. If we didn't do it, I would be disappointed in both of us. And then we did another episode last week that was a little bit different. And we kind of jumped out of the history realm, which we'll do here and there. But this one, this is interesting. I'd never heard of this until you brought it up. You sent it to me, and I was like, man, this is some good stuff. And you mentioned, you was like, hey, it's hard to find material unless you make it yourself on leadership lessons of World War I. And why is there a reason why you think that is so?
So there is a lot of lessons to World War I. I just think that the war was so bloody, and the way it was fought, it wasn't as there's trench warfare. I mean, and you're just throwing bodies at each other. It kind of makes it difficult to say, hey, what are those lessons? I mean, there's some. I'm gonna tell you, I wish I could remember the major's name, and I'm not doing him any justice, but there's a movie called The Lost Battalion. It was made for TV. It's Ricky Schroeder. And it's actually one of the history podcasts I listen to rated like these are the 10 most best military history films, and this is one of them. And in it, they're going to go over the trench, and they're going to move forward, and he's got, this major's like, hey, like this is, this isn't right, we're running out of supplies, and he's like, keep going, you got this country you got the French on this side of you got another battalion on this side, just keep going. Well,
Right.
meanwhile, these two battalions did not advance, but he did, and he ends up advancing into the middle of the German lines,
Surrounded.
right? Surrounded, but he led them. So I mean, we can go back to what we've talked about before about the importance of being
Right.
seen, being that leader who's leading from the front. Even at the end of this all, and I don't want to ruin it for people, but this is a good history story. Basically, that everything happens. The general comes, it's over, and he says, "Hey, get in my staff vehicle, and I'll take you back,
Right.
back to the camp, and your men will march back." And the major looks at him, he says, "If you don't mind, sir, I'll lead my men out of here." And he does. And they historically accurate. He gets up, and this major takes his men and he leads. And so there's leadership lessons that can be found in moments like that. Great movie,
Right.
but there's so much blood. It's so hard to say, hey, we learned from this. Like what we learned is trench warfare was terrible way of fighting. That's what we learned,
Yeah. And I mean, the numbers that were lost alone and like, those first few months was just catastrophic to all sides.
All sides. I've had I've been fortunate to go to where the scene of the Battle of Verdun was, and there's an ossuary there, and the ossuary is like, it's this long building, right? And then it's got an obelisk in the middle that you can go up in.
Right.
When you go up, there's these little windows about that big at the base. And when you look in the window, it is the remains of British and French soldiers. It's bones, skulls, ribs thrown in there that weren't identified. Yeah. So it's really like to see this. And then there's a huge cemetery there, but to see just the numbers of remains, it just really drives home how bloody a war World War I was. And this is no difference. And I picked this because many years ago, I did a World War I course and I had to write a paper, and this was what I wrote my paper about.
Vimy Ridge.
I did not retain all the information. However, the reason I picked Vimy Ridge then, as well as now, is to the Canadians, this is a very significant moment in their history as a country and as a military, and it's widely celebrated. My wife and I, this is around the same time I'm in this course. My wife and I are in Washington, D.C. We go by the Canadian Embassy, and there's a poster saying, hey, Vimy Ridge Remembrance Day, da-da-da. And so I was like, oh, that's interesting. Let me look into that. And so that's kind of what drove me to write this paper.
Okay.
I would like to take my wife there before we leave Europe. It's about 5-6 hours from where I'm at in Vimy, France. So as we talk about this today, you'll see this is very like this is the Canadians. I know. This is the Canadians fighting as the Canadians. They're still they're part of the British Empire, but this is them really coming of age. So, yeah. So that's why I picked it.
So how do you want to lead into this, my friend? This looks really intense.
It is. By the way, the memorial just looks fantastic. I can't wait to see this memorial that they have there. Very Canadian influence in the area. So World War I, as we said, there's several battles in World War I where there's multiple occurrences of that battle. This is no different. This is Vimy Ridge is fought over for many years. And that's where the significance really comes in. So one of the first things, the article we're using today is by Roger Grant. It's called Vimy Ridge Innovations and Leadership Lessons for Today.
Right. So hey, I'll make sure for those who are watching and not just listening, those of you who are watching, I'll put up a few pictures of that memorial he spoke about because they are remarkable pictures. I did a quick Google search and found a bunch. But so where are we going? Where are you taking us?
So when you look at Vimy Ridge, all right. So the Germans are on this ridge, and the ridge is about 4.5 miles long. And it's 470, 480 feet tall. So it has a huge field of vision from there. It's a great vantage point during this fighting. It was the Arrows campaign. And so, and let me look here. I did make some notes to make sure I get these things right because it's important in history, right? So from 1914 to 1916, the the French are tasked with this area, and they're trying to secure this ridge from the Germans. And in that time, so we're talking 2 years that they're fighting with the Germans over this ridge. And in
Right.
that time, the French lose about 150,000 people, soldiers, and they are not successful at all at pushing the Germans off this ridge. So then they're replaced, right? It's time for them to move on. I believe that they actually go to the Battle of Verdun from here, and they're
Oh,
replaced. Yeah, and they're replaced by the British. The British 17th Corps replaces them in 1916 to 1917. During the lull between the, like what we call a RIP, right? The relief in place. And while this is happening, what the Germans do is they start a tunneling system. We think about tunneling when we think about Vietnam, but here they're tunneling. They're putting mines underneath these tunnels. They're putting explosives to prep. They're basically prepping the battlefield for what's next. The Germans are.
okay.
So the British come in, and again, the British there from 1916, 1917, they can't push these guys off this ridge. And this is where it becomes significant for Canada, because this is the first time the Canadians are fighting as Canadians, right? They're not Canadians, a conglomerate of Canadians and British forces. These are them fighting as Canadians as
Okay.
one unit. And so the Canadians come in 1917, and the Battle of Vimy Ridge is from 9 April 1917 till 12 April 1917. And the Canadians come in with 4 corps. And through their course of their time there, they end up successfully moving the Germans off of the ridge and capturing the ridge. So you're talking about something that couldn't be done from from the French in 1914 till the end of the British time there in 1917. They have not been able to push these Germans off. But here comes the upstart 4 corps of Canadian soldiers to do this.
Right.
And trench warfare, we already talked about. You come over the top of the trench, you charge forward as far as you can, you try to get in another trench. You're using shell holes, which are basically where the impact of artillery or explosions are. Well, what the Canadians do is they do what we would call combined arms, right? At this time, Brian, this term isn't really coined yet, but we would call it combined arms. So
Okay.
what they're doing is you get your infantry lined up, right? And your artillery pounds, boom, 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 boom. And right before the artillery, right, stops firing, your infantry advances to that edge. And then the artillery lifts, the infantry stops, and then they continue to do this. Artillery fires, infantry advances, stops, and that's called a creeping barrage. And that's how the Canadians eventually worked their way up the ridge and displaced the Germans. So that's just kind of the all broad big stroke, Brian.
So this you're basically saying like that particular mechanism of moving forward, it hadn't been really used
No.
like that previously. Okay.
No,
All right.
not yet. So, and that's where when they talk about the Canadians and their great story of their innovation of their tactics, this is one of those things. They're doing a combined arms movement, and they're using a creeping barrage. Right now, as we're going to talk about in our leadership lesson portion, they also trained really hard for this. Right, like it wasn't just a thing. They did some extensive planning. They did meticulous planning, extensive training to be prepared for that scenario. And I don't think I did the casualty numbers. So for this, the Canadians end up losing 3,598 soldiers, about 3,600 soldiers, and another 7,000 wounded. The Germans lose 4,000 are captured. There's some debate over the actual KIA of the Germans, but the estimate puts it around 16,000 KIA during this campaign.
16,000. Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Wow. So that means that technique definitely was something that they put in their tool bag and said, yeah, this worked. Let's do this again.
And you'll find all kinds of different, the German numbers are in this article. He says 140,000 casualties. So there are different. The bottom line is there's a lot of losses on both sides, right? Not just both sides, the French, the British, right? They all had a great deal of deaths. Actually, if you look further in the article, they've actually called in French this the Ridge of Death. right?
Oh,
Is what
really?
Vimy Ridge is called. Yeah. So,
Okay. So basically, we're gonna take this entire scenario, and we're going to kind of look at why the Canadians were victorious at the same time on the battlefield that others weren't, and
yeah.
basically how they, what are the leadership lessons from that, right?
Yeah, yeah, no, I think that's excellent way to put it, Brian. I think what I'd like to do is maybe and then generate some discussion between you and I based off of these, because like you said, it's a brief article, really well done,
Right.
really significant. And again, for my Canadian family, this one's for y'all. But
Yeah.
we remember our veterans, and then that's the other thing, Brian. We talk about our veterans and what they went through and the lessons they learned. But the
Right.
Canadians, the British, I mean, there's so many other militaries that learn these valuable and unfortunately like these costly lessons. So, all right. So that's where we're at, Brian.
All right, so we're gonna go lesson one with this the radical battle plan.
Sure.
Okay. So what the author has to say here is basically success at Vimy came from an amazing level of innovation. Innovation, that's key, okay? And we'll get back to that. Canadian Army commanders refused to follow the familiar patterns of past battles. They would not wage war as usual. Instead, they designed and executed a battle plan that was radically different from any previous offensive. So basically, that creeping method that you brought up, that was not used. And it's great that they looked at it as, okay, if we do this, then this is what's going to happen.
Yeah.
And then we can do this, and this is what's going to happen. So this really reminds me a lot of when, for instance, Ed, so I'm going through the Department of Joint right now. And we also did this in the Department of Army Operations. And part of the things we did in it is we build courses of action, or COAs, for a battle plan or for a plan. And in it, we've talked about this, you're going to love it. We talk about wargaming and red teaming and things like that. And it's where you kind of lay out this scenario. Hey, we're going to do this to get a reaction. And then somebody plays the side of the enemy and they say, hey, we've done this to counter that.
Yeah.
And then we do a counter to their reaction. So it's action, reaction, counteraction. And you go through an entire scenario basically until one side wins or not. And it's kind of a game of chess. But the key thing with it, Ed, is you have to actually you have to know the intel on the opposite side. What are the capabilities of the enemy, right? Or my adversary? What are they known for doing, right? So this is what they're typically known for doing. And then how much time do we have? What's the weather like? All the permissive type stuff, all the, all these different things. I'm looking at this and I'm hearing what you're saying, Ed. And I think about this, like the Germans were probably expecting the same stuff from them as they did from the British and the French.
Absolutely.
And so let's reverse back in time, Ed. Let's say they did their wargaming like that, right? They like, hey, we're going to plan it. We're going to do the same thing we've always done because they've always done it this way. What the Canadians just did is they threw a massive monkey wrench into the cogs of basically scheme and maneuver and all that jazz. They literally changed it up through innovation and a creative thought process. I don't know. Like my question would be is like, who came up with this, or how did they develop this particular method to go into it? And what they did is they did the unexpected to achieve the goal that they needed. That's where I get from it, man.
Yeah, I think one of the things you hit on is one of the biggest things that we've talked about before. That's the way we've always done it, right? So in your organization, in your civilian organization, or in your formations, that's the way. We still hear this. I don't know about you, Brian, but I'm telling you, I still hear this now. Well, we've always done it that way. Well, is that person supposed to be doing that by doctrine? Well, no, but that's just how it's always been done. That doesn't make it right. And that's what I think about when I see this, is the Canadians weren't going to do it the way it's always been done. They weren't going to accept it. They had to come up with something. They were led by a man named Julian Byng, which also, side note, his wife later donates a trophy to the NHL in like 1924. It's the Lady Byng Trophy. This is still a thing. It's the Lady Byng Trophy, and it's awarded to like the most sportsmanlike. It's voted on as the player that they deem the most sportsmanlike player for the season receives the Lady Byng, and it is his wife. But anyway, so they're led, and everywhere you go, you can see his name all over Canada.
Right.
But this is why, like, he's the leader of this unit coming in here from the first. It's 4 corps from Canadians' First Army at this battle. But yeah, it's just, you say it. It's funny to me. Like, here's this leadership lesson about not doing it just because that's the way we've always done it. But here we are. We're here 100 years plus later, and we still have these problems. We still have people doing it because that's just the way we've done it. Now, if you say to me, hey, that's the way we've always done it, James, because this is what doctrine says, or this is what our organization's policy states, then okay, I got that. I'll give you that one, right? But if you say, well, that's just the way we've done it, and you can't support it with some kind of policy, then that becomes an issue. And I think that with the Canadians, one of the techniques that I learned about when I went through the Master Leader course is audacity on the offensive. And here it is. Like they're kind of offensive and defensive in this because they're moving and they're still accepting from the Germans the fire, but and they're digging, they're hitting these trenches, but audacity. All right. Well, these dudes are on a ridge almost 500 feet above you, looking down on you, and you're still advancing on them. I mean,
but you're doing something different. And now I'd have to I got to warn people of this. It doesn't mean you go into an organization as a leader and you always change everything. You first got to understand the situation before. And we call in the Army, we call that understanding the operational environment. That's what it is. So I have to understand all the factors of the operational environment before I can just boom throw a plan at it. Because what if what's taking place actually works, right? Maybe there's some small pieces here and there, but overall it works. Well, you don't change it. You don't want to disrupt a system. However, in this case, because this is, in a wartime situation, they were disrupting a situation by throwing a new solution to an old problem. It was an old problem. They've always had it. And it's like, to me, it was the way the British and the French kept trying to do it. It was very much like the definition of insanity, the whole constantly doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different outcome. And that's not going to happen. It's like, I mean, for instance, hey, here's a great example, man. We think about Michael Jordan, right? We think about Michael Jordan's ability and all these things that took place. However, people often forget he came into the league many years before he started winning championships. Yeah. And he was, and one of the big things that if you watch in the different specials about him is like, he was throwing down heavy numbers. He was an all-star from the beginning and he was killing it. He just couldn't get over the top and get a championship without a good supporting cast. Yeah. You can't win the game by yourself. Now, later on, he gets a great supporting cast and he's still performing at that level. Boom. Okay, I got it. It's the same thing to me, like with a military problem or a business problem. You can have all the talent in the world, but if you keep trying to like pound that door in, if you're punching a steel door with your bare fist, you're not going to get anything. What you need is a battering ram. You need some explosives. You need some stuff to kind of jumble it up. That's what I think of. But that's a good way. Do you want to take us further into the next area?
Yeah, this one here is new thinking, new tactics, new technology. And they adopted, so the Canadians adopted a new combat philosophy, right? The creeping barrage. They implemented daring field tactics, leveraged new technology, embraced a revolutionary command structure. In the process, they created the modern model of warfare, which is still in use today. Combined arms. Yes. Combined arms. So for this, though, I'm going to go and tie it into the first point with the innovation, because here is saying they adopted a new combat philosophy, implemented daring field tactics, right? Leveraged new technology based off of new thinking, new tactics, new technology. But where's that new come from? Well, it comes from innovation. And where's that innovation come from? Well, I'm going to be honest with you, Brian. I feel like for us, at times the innovation comes from the young soldiers. Because
Does.
you and I have always done it the same way. But that
Mhm.
young soldier is going to say, well, when I played high school football, we did this, this, and this, and this is how we
Mhm.
got prepped for a game. And now you put that in figure a way to like creatively put that in your physical training program,
Mhm.
whatever it is, and you may change the game on how your soldiers train or how they receive it, right? They may not be like, oh, here we go again, because you did something else. Maybe do guerrilla drills. Remember old guerrilla drills? I actually
Mhm.
like doing guerrilla drills. Oh, but I think that new thinking, it comes from the younger people, but
Right. Right.
it comes from one of our main sponsors, Brian, Lifelong Learning, right?
Lifelong Industries.
Because Brian can bring something new to the table too that he just learned in his current whatever master's class, doctorate class, whatever class. I know for a fact you've learned stuff in college and
Yeah.
then brought it into the Army, because
Oh
I've done
yeah.
it, right?
Oh yeah.
We're doing it right now at this podcast. I'm a
Mhm.
military history major, and we're bringing this in to help people understand how influence works. So
Yeah.
I think it comes from not just the younger generation, but also from those people willing to be lifelong leaders and to think outside the box.
Yeah. You started bringing all that up, and you started slinging those crazy words around. First thing it popped in my head, Kolb. Second thing, experiential learning. Like I was just like, that's
You like cold too.
I do. I love the idea behind it, because what you're doing,
Yeah.
what you said about like, hey, this kid, he comes in, he says, hey, we did this before we played this game. And it helped us. That's experiential learning right there. You're taking their experiences,
100%.
you're helping everyone else learn from the situation. You're building upon. Now, like I said, all the time though, you don't want to change everything. Not everything is broken all the time. Now, if it is,
Yeah.
maybe you may want to look at the organization. However, even like we're talking about basically military battles and stuff like that. But this translates easily to me, Ed.
Easily.
I'm sorry, James. This translates easily into the civilian market, and looking at
Okay.
tactics, techniques, and procedures. And it could be anything from, if you're a salesperson, or if you're somebody who's working in the security department or the IT department. There's always new mechanisms out there that could help elevate it.
Yeah.
But don't start implementing. You first got to do a little bit of an analysis of it, and that's why I like and analyze it and be like, okay, is this really the mechanism needed for our ability to achieve the goal we set for? Is this the new thinking we want? Is this the new tactics? A lot of times when you look at Ed, I keep calling you Ed. James.
I'm going to see how many episodes it takes before you stop.
It's going to take forever, because I never knew
okay.
James. I only know
it's all right, buddy.
I never knew James. I don't know him. I don't know James. But the new thinking, new tactics, you look at a lot of companies, they bring in leadership from outside the company, right?
Mhm.
They want that new thinking. They want that new strategy. Like it's funny, but if people within the organization would start pushing like their new ideas, they maybe get elevated in it, so that to me, that's a big thing, man.
Yeah, I think we just have to be a little bit cautious too, because we have in our organization, we have these good idea folks sometimes, but we also, the problem is when you have these people who you bring in and they have good ideas, right? Because obviously you and I, every 3 years or so, we're going to move, right?
Yes.
And we have our bag of good ideas, but if you don't do that analysis and say, okay, where's this organization?
Yeah.
How can I help this organization? What can I bring to strengthen the organization? And you just jump in with your good ideas, you get a reputation. It's called a good idea fairy. You just go in and you sprinkle your good ideas around, and it doesn't always pan out, and it ends up putting you in a negative light. So you just got to be very cautious. That analysis you talked about, Brian, so crucial. You have to analyze the situation when you come into it before you start trying to help develop and make your organization a better place in your view.
Yeah.
And make sure you get buy-in from the people you work with, right? Like you can't just go in and say, well, this is what I think makes us better, period. No. What are your thoughts, Brian? I mean,
yeah, it's just, it's one of those things that, James, that you just can't, if you come straight into a place and just try to make a change, you're going to get what's called change resistance. You're
Yep.
going to have people to say that'll never work. You're going to have all that. You have to evaluate what's going to be the mechanism that kind of slides this idea in, that kind of helps flow it along. You have to, and I think that comes down to a new way of thinking and being able to do those things.
Yep.
You ready to move on to this next area?
All right. Oh yeah, I know. This worked out good for you to have. What you got there, Brian?
This right here is visionary leadership. To me, being a visionary and trying to kind of set a pace and set a tone for an organization. And when I say visionary, it's like, okay, this is what I see it can be, not what it is. And that's what's, to me, that is critical to be able to do. You're setting up the motivation, the drive, all those things, the initial, you're setting up all that stuff through that vision and how you do it. But let me read what it says here real quick. The groundwork for Vimy victory was laid by two visionary leaders, Canadian Corps Commander Julian Byng. Is it Byng?
Byng.
Byng? Okay.
Yep.
And then Major General Arthur Currie. They began their planning work in the late fall of 1916. So right there, James, we're showing that this isn't something that they started 2 weeks before they went and fought in 1917.
Nope.
This was started a year prior.
Yeah.
So they're assessing that 1914, 1915. They're in 1960. They're assessing it. They're like, you know what? We could do it this way. So,
yeah.
All right. So Currie was a rarity in military leadership. He had worked his way up through the ranks from lowly militia gunner and was Canadian born. Byng was not a Canadian, at least not yet. 3 years after the war, he became the highest ranking of all Canadians, serving as the country's 12th governor general. That sounds pretty important.
Yeah.
All right. A lifelong military man of noble birth, Byng came from a long family line of Army generals that dated back 150 years. There's some history there, you know. He began his Army career at an age 17 and graduated from a leading military college. He had a distinguished service record from postings in Sudan, India, South Africa, Egypt, and the Dardanelles. So what I'm getting here, Ed, is you got people that they're not of the norm. They're not from that normal situation. They kind of came from different aspects and they worked their way up through, starting at that bottom. Like that, I don't know what a lowly militia gunner is, but I'm guessing it's kind of like a private, right? It's kind of like
to me. Yeah.
That's what I get. So lowly militia gunner, like, hey, you with the big gun, you over there, that type of thing. But, so really, if you want to back it up, James, we're talking. Say, I'm going to keep going, James, because I can't. This isn't where it's not
Crutch
rolling
word.
off the tongue. Yeah. But if you're looking at it, we're talking about two people who came from different paths, different backgrounds. One of them 150 years worth of experience. The other one, he came from the bottom, worked his way up. The both of them, they're building this plan since 1916. They implement it in 1917. So it goes to show that they had a vision back here. They projected it, and it enabled their forces, I personally think, to become victorious.
Yep.
Because of how they devised it. Your thoughts, man?
So here's what I was thinking, Brian. We're trying to figure out like some of these terms, and I do have some friends in the Canadian military I should have reached out to. But so I look at it as you got private, right? Private Currie, the lowly, just joined the Army. But then you have Byng, who's the West Point graduate. And now they're in command together, right? One's, in our case, let's use what makes sense to you and I. One's the sergeant major and one's the colonel in the battalion, right? They came different paths to get there, but they have a shared vision as leaders that led them to start planning this well in advance. That meticulous planning allowed them to then do some extensive training. So they were doing training behind the lines prior to assuming command and control of the Vimy Ridge region. And I think that's where we get to. We're looking at these two very different military paths, but now they're together and they have a shared vision, right? So I think that's what I kind of got from this, Brian. And I also got they send a lot of people out to Africa and India in the Canadian military back then. We don't get those posts very often.
What I want to kind of just throw out there before we jump over into the very next section that you're going to hit up on is we did a show not too long back about Mission Command, and as I'm looking through this and I'm understanding it further from you kind of like projecting it as this is the story, this is how it went. I see Mission Command written all over this, written all of it. Now, is there some command and control, James? Yeah. There probably is.
Oh,
yeah. It definitely is because of that type of warfare during that time. You got to think about it. It's you fire, you hold. All right, move. And it's all these types of. There's some command code, but in the mission command piece, I see competence. I see mutual trust. Right, those soldiers are trusting that command has made the right decision on shooting those artillery over them. So they can move, and that stuff's not going to come in at them, right? Because it's not like the artillery is like literally like 10 or 15 feet. It's probably a little bit back from them, obviously.
But it's impact. So sorry, Brian. So when they're doing this creeping barrage, it's impacting 10 or 15 feet in front of their advance.
Yeah.
So there's some trust there, right? That you're going to stop firing, and I'm going to be okay. You're not going to shoot me from behind. And you're also not going to hit me in the front. So, and back then, it was harder to communicate. They don't have these high-speed radios that we have now. There's a lot more difficulty of communication. So there had to be that trust that you're talking about. That's very important. I'm glad you brought that up.
Absolutely. And then we got shared understanding. We got that one down. The commander's intent, guaranteed it was out there. Mm-hmm. The whole, hey, this is what we're going to do because we've built this plan. We know it's going to, we have great, trust in it. It's going to work. They got their mission orders. The discipline initiative, I don't see that as much, but maybe it's the discipline initiative of, it is coming.
It's going to come.
And then risk acceptance. You think about what you just said.
Yeah.
You got artillery, they just coming in, and it's like, there's some major risk here. We're taking on massive risk, but right. But let's move on. Where are we going next?
All right, so we're going to talk about the approachable aristocrat. So you already talked about Byng was a high-ranking British aristocrat with close ties to the royal family. But he was not a cold or distant commander. He was refreshingly approachable and demonstrated a genuine concern for soldiers under his command. He won the heartfelt admiration of Canadian troops who proudly identified themselves as Byng's boys. Genuine concern for soldiers, Brian, especially for what I have witnessed as an enlisted guy. A genuine concern for soldiers you'll have a whole career if you just have that thing. Mm-hmm. You can learn the other stuff, but you have to genuinely care about your soldiers, right? And in this case, he could have been, hey, like I literally had dinner with the prince last week or the king. You're beneath me, but he wasn't. And I picture Byng down there, like, he's in the muck and the mud in these trenches with them, right? Mm-hmm. He's hating life just like they are. And just like I talked about with that movie, The Lost Battalion, the major that Ricky Schroeder plays in that movie, same thing. They show him. He's in the trenches. He's stuck in the German lines with them. He's separated from everybody else, just like they are. And then that gains that leadership capital, really. But, he's hating life just like we hate life right now. So you get that mutual understanding going. And I think that's what this is really trying to get at with Byng.
Yeah. Genuine concern. That right there alone will give you so much credibility, so much respect. And we're not talking about, like, when I say genuine concern, like actually being concerned about like what's going on, how you can take care of them. In our day and age, there's lots of things that go on, like not even dealing with, the battle that we take genuine concern in. But a lot of times, like, my thought is like, where's their head at? Like I'm concerned of where's the person's head at when we're in the thick, right? Are they concerned about this, or this? You know, I've got to be able to battle that by reassurance and things like that. But he won the heartfelt admiration of Acadian troops who proudly identified themselves as Byng's boys.
Byng's boys.
Is that something that's talked about among, you know, the Canadian
I mean, I
groups?
haven't heard that. So I think it's kind of like, so there's a story going to the next war, and you know, a lot of people did not enjoy General Patton. They didn't like him as a person, but those that served with him. So if I said to you, Brian, what unit are you in? You would usually say, well, I'm in 12th Cab, Combat Aviation Brigade, or I'm with 159th Combat Aviation Brigade, Bravo Company, 563rd, right? But with Patton, they would say, I'm with Patton. They wouldn't necessarily say the unit. I'm with Patton. And I think this is kind of similar to that. Hey, what outfit are you with? Well, I'm one of Byng's boys. And I think that's the old veterans. Unfortunately, definitely this generation has been lost to us. But yeah, that's the first time I had saw it. I went back and looked at it, and it's definitely in some of the research that I did. So I just brain dumped it at this point. But yeah, it's just one of those terms, you know. Hey, who you with? You know, I remember my very first section. I was artillery first, and my very first gun section, we were second to none. We were second. Right. We were the second gun, but our name was second to none. And they'd say, hey, what section you're in? You wouldn't say second. I'm in second to none. And it didn't matter. They knew what battery you were in. They knew all that. So I think it's one of those things that comes with the admiration of the leadership and the pride in the organization that we've also talked about. That's important.
Yeah, I had a conversation. It was with a sergeant major about a year and a half ago. It was not too long ago, and one of the things he brought to my attention, and I'm like, man, that really makes sense. It's like, how do you get people to be so ingrained and proud of the organization? And then this could go across. It doesn't have to just be the service. It could be whatever organization. I was like, hey, I'm proud that I work for blah, or I'm a part of the team at blah. And this is how he put it to me. He's like, if you think about it, you know, you're wearing that 101 patch, you know, on your shoulder, because you obviously went to combat with him, and you identify yourself as, I'm a 101 guy, right? Yeah. Just like you'll have other people that identify themselves as I'm an 82nd guy, or I'm a first cap guy. Mm-hmm. He's like, you don't hear a lot of people say, hey, I'm this particular organization person. He's like, I want to change that mentality. I want people to be proud to be a part of that and say, I'm a blah, blah person, you know? And I'm like, man, that, you know, that you're building something when you do that. So it makes me wonder, like, what was the mindset of the soldiers, you know, they take on that nickname. But beyond that, like, what was the attitude? What was it that just kind of made them be a part of that? And it's that part of leadership, is that part of influence. That's, you can't buy it. You can't. You have to earn it in some manner, and it could be your thoughts, your smarts, but you got to be able to be a personable person. You have to be like, there's lots of little elements that have to go into it. So let's move on though.
Oh no,
go ahead.
So real quick, you make a great point, and we've talked about, you know, these patches. We call them combat patches, right? Like, it's funny because I find desire to wear the patch of a unit after I'm gone. But when you're in the midst of it, I don't know if it was just me being disgruntled, right, with that particular. So when I'm in first cav, you know, I had no choice. Well, actually, I did have a choice at that time still. But when I'm in first cav, right, I have 2 patches I could wear because I had been before with 10th Mountain. But I would always wear the 10th Mountain patch. Why? Well, because I'm currently in this environment, and I was not happy being there at that moment, in the moment, right? Then I leave. Now I leave and I go to Fort Drum. But now all of a sudden I'm like, you know what? I'm going to start wearing my first cav patch. So I slap on the first cav patch because I've left the environment now. Now I'm back in 10th Mountain, and I'm like, yeah, I'm not wearing that. So it was weird for me. That's just a me thing. It's not necessarily this is
Mhm.
how it's supposed to be thing. And then another thing I had, Command Sergeant Major Rodney Rhodes was my sergeant major in my battalion. And we were running around first cab and wearing the 10th Mountain patch. And this was when Brett Favre went to Minnesota. And he said, do you think Brett Favre is going to show up to his next football game with a Green Bay Packers jersey on? And I was like, no, Sergeant Major, that's ridiculous. He says, but you have a 10th Mountain patch on when we're redeploying, not a first cav patch. Now, at that point, I just became a jerk and resistant. And I was like, yeah, I'm not changing my patch either. So, but I knew what he meant. And I knew he wasn't wrong, right? Here's the ceremony to welcome back the 1st Cavalry Division. And I have to wear a different patch. So, but yeah, I always remember him saying that. You think Brett Favre is going to show up in Minnesota in a Green Bay Packers jersey? So,
yeah, I would agree with him.
Yeah.
I would agree because I was once told you have to love the one you're with. Love the one you're with, and I wore my 101 patch all the way up until I deployed with another organization because all my other deployments were 101, right? But now I have a
so
choice.
your situation's a little unique. Yeah.
It was a little unique, but once I earned that one from the other one, I changed it out because I got to I got to show my connection to that organization and stuff. However, since I've been away from that other unit, that other organization, I continue because inside I'm still a 101 guy, and that's the way it'll be for a very long time.
I didn't like being called a chicken sandwich, so I wouldn't wear the double eagle. It's just, I think that's my thing. It's just a me thing, right? It's not a organizational thing. It's not a doctrinal thing. I just don't like having matching patches.
Yeah,
I don't know.
Something about
Yeah,
I don't know.
I'm a weirdo. All right, let's move on.
All right. Well, hey, this is then the next area is good for you. It's called open to new ideas. All right, so open to new idea. Despite his military bloodline, academic training, and decades of combat experience, Byng was remarkably open to new ideas, even if it meant going against the prevailing wisdom of the day. So he's basically saying, hey, this is the tactics, techniques, and procedures they've been using. We're not going to do that. We're going to do this other thing. Byng and Currie rejected the war of attrition doctrine that saw combat as a pure numbers game where victory came to the side that threw the most men into battle. Man, I'm glad we got away from that, huh?
Yeah.
They refused to perpetuate the senseless slaughter of previous battles where soldiers were ordered to march in tight formations right into the firing line of 500 round per minute machine gun batteries. At the Battle of the Somme in 1916, this approach resulted in 57,000 British casualties in the first half hour of fighting. Are you kidding me? Like, I mean, come on, man. That's so basically they said, hey, listen, that's getting people killed entirely too much. There has to be a better way. There has to be, and then they took that conviction. They took their understanding of military warfare. They took their understanding of how the enemy's fighting, and they developed this plan that you talked about. And to me, that's how you come up with these new ideas. It's not these two did not just show up to the organization on day one and say, oh, we're changing everything. No. They had to look at things and say, okay, this is not working. This didn't work here. This could work if we do this, this, and this. And they probably war gamed through it. Guaranteed they did. They practiced it, like you said. They ran drills. So they did everything to make them successful. They did everything up to the execution. Now it comes down to those individuals fighting to rely upon their training and their understanding of this new way of fighting, and they did it, and they became victorious in their efforts.
Absolutely.
Go ahead.
No, I really want to go to the next point because it's going to play so well into it, but in our organizations, things are. This is again the old way of thinking of that's how we do things. But you gotta be open to these new ideas, and so you're talking about the way the innovation, the technology. So the next one would be victory through artillery. So Byng and Currie were committed to make Vimy a different type of battle. And this is important, especially in World War One. They wanted to accomplish something that had never been done before. They wanted to pay the price of victory with artillery shells, not men. And so when you talk about the casualties for British casualties in the first half hour of fighting, 57,000, right? In Somme, that was how the mentality, like they're expendable in World War One. You know, it wasn't, they weren't humans. They were expendable piece. Just throw it at it. And there are countries in World War II, Russia fights a very similar idea. That's why their casualties are so out of whack with everybody else, because Russia is just like, throw people at it. Where we throw money at it. Anyway, so they wanted to change the game. Okay, but how? Because with the technology, like there would be a lot required. And what they did, it said it would require significant improvements in identifying and hitting enemy targets and a new level of orchestration between enemy fire and infantry advance, the combined arms approach that results in the creeping barrage. So what these guys do, and this is the best part of this whole blurb for me, so new technology is needed. New techniques would have to be perfected. Learning would be vital. In 1916, Currie went on a fact-finding mission to interview British and French officers to learn what had worked and what hadn't at the Battle of the Somme and Verdun. Did he just do an AER to try to save lives, to develop a new way of doing things? So going back to what you were just talking about, Brian, did he just say, hey, here's this new idea. Let's be open. I mean, if I'm a soldier and you say, hey, we got this idea, we want to do it this way, and it's going to cost us far fewer lives, I'm all in. Push all the chips to the center of the table. I am all in, my friend. So that's why I thought this one went really well with the point before, Brian. What are your thoughts about victory through artillery?
We're showing that it still works today. And that's the reason why it's such an important piece. But to me, now I'm wondering, well, what does artillery look like for an organization that's not in the military? Like, what is that cover fire, so to speak, for an organization to get ahead and to do better? You know, and it could be all kinds of things. It could be new products coming out to kind of help propel the forward movement. We could look at Apple, right?
Yeah.
We could look at Apple and their development of the different types of products and how they'll push out this new idea of this new phone or this new iPad thing, and it helps them gain ground. You know, it may not, and it might not come out for a few more weeks. However, they're projecting, sending that artillery forward of information to inform consumers, hey, we got a new product. Here it is. And we're kind of project the information's out in front of the product, because one, you're got to advance that product up, right? And it's the same. And obviously, it's not war, right? I get it. However, there are means we could take to get our forces forward in anything we do.
Yeah.
And it could be menial stuff. It could be the smallest tasks. Sometimes we have to have something to kind of project, you know, motivation in itself will do that. If you learn how to motivate people or finding what their buy-in is or what it does, sometimes that is your artillery. That's your artillery to push those people forward to allow them to make gains. Sometimes that's what people need. You know what I mean? Like, coming to a job every day and just grinding it out, that gets tiresome. It really 100%. Does. Well, what if I said, hey, Ed, I need you to get X amount of contracts done through this program. And for each one you do, we're going to give you 5% on the deal that you've made with that organization once it's pushed through. Well, that's kind of like that carrot situation. You know what I mean? You put the carrot in front of the horse. That's what that is. And it's the same mentality in a sense, is I'm doing something to motivate. So I personally, the fact that what you just said with the AAR part, I love that. That to me, that's an AAR before there was an AAR. I'm telling you.
So I was just thinking, and you and I recently, you turned me on to a certain podcast, and they were talking about some of these streaming services. And to me, Ready? Hear me out now. You correct me, Brian, if you think I'm misreading this. Creeping barrage, artillery, infantry moves up, right? So
Right.
So the infantry is the thing. We know what they do, right? So the NFL is the infantry. We know what they do, right?
Yeah.
But now Amazon has a streaming service. The infantry moves up. So the infantry is holding Amazon up because Amazon knows what they're getting in the NFL. They know they know what the product is. So they're just pushing the envelope. Where can we go with live sports? Can we get the Super Bowl at Amazon? And I think Pat called it what? FANG, Facebook, Amazon, Apple, Netflix, Google are those streaming services, right? That are trying to get into live sports now. And it's so odd because I've been talking to my wife a few times about the live sports and the streaming, but that is to me that technology advancing. We have a known entity, the NFL.
Yeah.
And
Absolutely.
we're just moving. And so within your organization, what's your known entity? And what's that thing that you're going to use that entity to hold up to push forward and advance? That's kind of how I see it, Brian. If I'm crazy, tell me I'm crazy.
Well, and so here's the deal. What are you gaining what are you gaining from putting those on those streaming services? Well, this is what I see it as. One, those streaming services are a lot more affordable than like that NFL ticket package thing, right? Like that's expensive. Like
Which
that
one of them is getting ready to buy, probably. But yes.
Exactly, right? But if you're making this an affordable thing, now what did you do? You just increased your market of viewership. What does your market of viewership do for you in the background? Oh, advertisers. Oh, now I got more sales. You see what I'm saying? So there's the cause and effect, and that's a big thing in business. Is an understanding business is like things aren't just okay. So we do this show. It's pretty much free. No one pays for anything. There's no advertising in it. We have our gimmicky fun ones.
We pay in our blood, sweat, and tears, Brian.
Yeah. And so in every year I pay like $100 to push this out. And then you and I, obviously we each upgrade our equipment here and there. You use some of your stuff for just the podcast, and the other stuff you use for everything, like your GoPros. But when it comes to that particular thing, what you're talking about, that victory through artillery, they're using that to get that market of people, because I'm going to tell you right now, I am not going to buy a Sunday ticket. It's too much money. It's money coming out of my family's, and you look at and how things are going right now too. Like let's look at the economy, right? And now I'm jumping over into, I'm not getting into the political side, but I just want to look at the economy. We look at like gas, things like that. What's some of the things that can still be fun to do, and you don't have to go somewhere and spend $80 in gas? Because to fill up my truck, my truck's at least $80 to fill it up. My wife's was $50 the other day, and then she has a little tiny gas tank. So what can I do as a family that'll be fun and we all like? It's streaming services. Well, I'm not going to pay for one service that costs like hundreds of dollars. I think it's like $350. It's pretty expensive.
It's 300
for the
plus,
NFL.
Ultra, yeah.
But I can pay and have like 3, 4, 5 different services, and one of them just happens to offer what I like, along with the stuff that my family likes. Where's the deal? I'm going with the one that does all the services, and that's the smart thing about it. So you hit the perfect nail on the head with the victory through artillery. That's a big thing people need to think about. Well, but what about a leader though, Ed? So what are we think about victory through artillery with a leader. What is it that they're doing? What's their artillery rounds going ahead of their subordinates to get the subordinates forward? You know what I mean? Like, what are the things we're doing? It could be as simple as changing policies. It could be changing. I'm working on getting the motivation and esprit de corps of my organization by changing this policy to do this. Me personally, I think it comes down to hands in pockets, my friend. Those of you in the military know what I mean.
Hands in pockets.
The Air Force just changed theirs.
Yeah.
That's a new rule. They just changed a few things. They can walk and talk on the cell phone. They can eat while walking. They can walk around with their hands in their pockets. They can double roll their, like, it's just like the small things. It's a part of it. And I have an Air Force buddy that goes to school with me here. He rides. I try to ride with him. I can't keep up. He's fast, man. But he's like, man, these are the types of things. And I had a conversation with my friend, another friend yesterday. I said, you know what, it would be funny to do like a little commercial type thing of like an Army guy and an Air Force guy just standing in there. He's like, you know, the Army guy saying, hey man, what happened to you? You know, you used to be one of us. And then the Air Force guys, it's not you, it's me. I had to change, you know, something stupid like that, man.
Actually kind of funny. I mean, but you know, we all laughed back in the day when the Sergeant Major of the Army allowed black socks and physical fitness
I loved
uniform.
I'm wearing them right now.
Like, it's really black socks. That's what he's worried about. But was that what he was worried about? Or was he working on some esprit de corps? Was he working on morale?
I don't care what anybody says. White socks, after one use, they look like garbage. Black socks, you can still wear them every day, and they still look good. I used to hate
soldiers coming to formation with gray socks on. It's like, what are they supposed to be? Like, but yes, so small, right? Small thing. Just, you know what? You guys can wear black socks now. Boom.
That's what it is.
There's an uptick, right? So,
all right, next section: thorough preparation, and we're not talking about preparation H. We're talking about thorough preparation, neglecting nothing. While on that trip, Currie jotted in his notebook that what provided to be the guiding philosophy for the Vimy battle plan. He wrote, thorough preparation must lead to success. Neglect nothing.
Yep.
Man, that's a lot, dude. And that's all that was under that section, really, because then the next page goes into say,
yeah, oh yeah.
So prepare. We talk about rehearsal.
Yep.
In what I'm doing now, where I'm working now, in military school, not goodness, I can't wait to tell you about my next class. It's nothing about leadership. It's all about management. And if you add anything about leadership in that class, you're wrong. You have to talk only about managing. Yeah. So I have to shift gears. Like, I'm used to doing this one thing, but I love it because it helps me broaden. But thorough preparation. So one of the things we do in school here is we're running through these briefs, and we prepare these briefs. We, obviously it's a PowerPoint, blah, 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 whatever. But it's the fact that we go through the rehearsal of the simple things. Is my slide comes up. Hey, I'm going to talk about X, Y, Z. Then I'll be followed by such and such, right? It's that transition. If we didn't go through the mechanism, right, I don't see it to be a flowing brief like it should be. And it's the small things that matter. Like, we don't have to do the preparation. We don't have to do the rehearsal.
Right.
No one says you have to, but we do it and we've done multiple briefs in this particular department I'm in right now in this class. And each time we still do even though we've done it before, we do it again. And then the next brief we'll do it again. And preparation helps neglecting nothing, because nothing's left out there. Because I can tell you right now, James, every time we've done a preparation, there's always been a hiccup. Hey, should we do it this and say this or not do that? You know what I'm saying? So there's always something that comes up. We fix that problem in the preparation. So we're not sitting there looking like dummies during the actual brief in front of our evaluators.
Yeah.
Your thoughts, sense, man, because I know you do a lot of that stuff where you work now.
So first of all, let's talk about preparation. Let's talk about the bearded ninja.
Oh, my goodness.
I think I've mentioned on the show, this dude used to teach the empty chairs.
Chair 1, chair 2.
Chair 1. Schmugatelli. What do you think? And it was stuff that he had done over and over. I mean, this dude's been teaching there. I mean, you and I left there. Well, we got there in 15. He had already been there for a long time. Mm-hmm. And he's still prepared like it was the first time he taught a class. And that is the difference maker. That's how you're the chief of the instructor boards like that. Yeah. Because of that. I mean, I'm going to tell you, I remember being evaluated and not rehearsing and just being like, I got it. I've done this before.
No.
My evaluation was not as good as when I prepped. I learned a valuable lesson, right? Because first of all, in the preparation, that gets you comfortable with the material. But then when the student, right, you're facilitating the student ask a question that could be way out in right field, because you were prepared properly, it allows you to field that question and maintain your status, right, as the SME or the subject matter expert. But if you don't prepare and that confidence, that's where the crutch words come in. That's where you're tap dancing when the soldier asks you a question that you probably should have known. So that's where I think the preparation comes, that's where the success comes from in the prep. It's in the preparation. I mean, yeah.
Hey, so thing came to mind. I just wrote a paper about informal leadership and their how to use their talents in organizational change. So one of the first things I thought about was organizational change when we talk about preparation and leave nothing, out there, is when you have organizational change, you're changing something in that organization that's a big key factor, you're going to have that change resistance.
Mm-hmm.
But if you, when building the change, build in factors to help guide through that resistance, you're actually ushering along that change a little bit faster,
Yep.
a little bit easier. Those roadblocks are no longer like big barricades. They're more like a road, a rumble strip or something. You know what I mean? It's like, oh, okay, we're there. Okay, let's keep going. And too many times we say, all right, we got to change this and we're going to do it this way. And then you get to a resistance, and then it's like, oh crap, give me a moment, let me think about it. But if you prepared for it, you wouldn't have to do that. Give me a moment, let me think about it. You gotta, great book is Leading Change by Cotter Change Model is a big thing. Great book, and he helps guide people through that. In that book, I used that book when we changed the curriculum. That was the basis of my entire change model of using, or it wasn't my change model, it's his change model. I used his theory to help changing the curriculum at the BLC at the time. And when we had those naysayers, I had got the right people on board.
Steve.
the right people helped usher it in because they were excited about the change. So what do? We got to create an excitement to do this, do that. So that's my little soapbox on it. Let's move on, my friend.
Well, I got news for you, Brian. We're going to combine arms on this one. You ready? So the first one is a new command. Byng and Currie scrapped the traditional command and control leadership model that treated soldiers as little more than human tools. This is real now. British Army training manuals back then stated that soldiers should instinctively obey orders without thinking. First of all, I do not want a soldier who doesn't think in my organization, but we'll get on to that. Their only job was to do as they were told. Remember that? Do as you're told. Do as you're told. Not what I do. So in this top-down approach, battlefield objectives were only divulged to a select group of officers. Rank and file soldiers were kept in the dark. If anything happened to their unit leaders during combat, which was a common occurrence, the soldiers were left to drift aimlessly across the battlefield. And I thought that played into the next one, which is, we're going to come back, Brian. You're going to get I see it.
No, go ahead.
Get it all at one shot.
I love this. Go ahead.
We're going to come back to, so making soldiers fully informed and fully engaged. Byng and Currie refused to put their troops in this position. They didn't want an army of mindless pawns, but a fighting force that was fully informed, fully engaged. So they took the extraordinary step of explaining the platoon mission vision to every soldier weeks in advance of the actual battle and walking them through the assignment on a full-scale replica of the actual battlefield sand table. Every soldier knew which enemy bunker they had to capture, where it was located, how far it was from the Canadian trenches, what route to travel, and what obstacles they were likely to encounter along the way. The soldiers learned every detail of the coming battle except the date it would take place. Brian, oh my goodness, first of all, I don't even know how they operated with mindless soldiers. And we've talked about a few times kind of the old school mentalities in the military, and the hands out your pocket, get off the grass, go make some coffee mentalities, right? But it's so important. You have to have thinkers because, experiential learning. What Brian has experienced and what James has experienced does not match what Captain Schmugatelli has experienced. But together, we can come together, right? And then I think I told you before, I told you where you're going, the great place. You're probably going to the National Training Center in Fort Irwin, California. They're going to take out leadership positions to see if your subordinates can adapt. This is ridiculous. These soldiers just, once their leadership was out, they just aimlessly wander across the most dangerous battlefield possibly in the history of man, right? We're just out here and we have no idea what's next. So that's why I just thought they went so far into this. Like, and then again, when we talked about earlier about where did these innovations come from, right? They come from the experience of us, but they come from the innovation of young soldiers. And if I don't involve them in any of the process, how do I get that innovation, Brian? How do I get it?
Creative and critical thinking, maybe.
Oh, there we go. The two
That's
C's.
one of my.
I mean, yeah, it's great.
Yeah, that's one of my answers. Not only the creative and critical thinking, but looking for those informal leaders within your organization. That helps out. I
like them guys too, and gals.
I'm dedicated to that particular subject. So you went through both those areas. The instinctive obeying orders without thinking. It automatically reminds me. I think of Revolutionary War. Soldiers lined up in file, in ranks, walking against
walk at it,
shooting, and people are just shooting in this big barrage of people. It's just like, to me, I'm like, how does that even make sense? And then I look for, then you look, so that was conventional war.
Yeah.
And conventional war, now you look at what we do now is considered conventional warfare. However, what we do now in contrast to that is considered irregular warfare, and where did we learn? I just wrote a massive paper. I turned it in on Friday.
Writing, my friend.
All the time, man. That's all we do. But I just wrote a big one on during the Vietnam War. And that, to me, like, the Vietnam War was the big one that really stepped away from the conventional warfare and into that irregular warfare of, people had to get out. When you're out in a jungle and you can't see 5 feet in front of you and you don't know if somebody's to your left or to your right that's trying to kill you or to be your friendly, you can't be just instinctively, and I love that word, instinctive, by the way, instinctively obeying orders without thinking. You've got to keep your head. You have to be trained a certain way. And I think that comes down to that new command model. Like, when they talk about everyone knew the entire plan. They knew where they were going. They knew every step. That was a proper rehearsal. That was a proper way about going about making sure that if I have this person within this group of people and they're going to move forward, I'm going to expect a loss somewhere in there. However, I'm still moving that forward through my barrage of artillery coming overhead. There's so much to it, man. It's like, I didn't know about this story beforehand, Ed and James. And what's getting me is, it's like, how did this not become a thing before this time frame? Like, how did that not, like it's just all of a sudden these guys came up with this grand scheme on how to move through a battle. This is amazing. This is a great story, brother. I love it.
And it's just, I mean, it's a thinking man's anything in your organization. You have to think things through. You have to figure out what's going on. I think it's important not only just to think, but to think what's the second and third order effects. Because I've met some great people who can think in the moment, but they don't think about the next part of that. What's that do? And then what's that impact? And who does it impact? So I've seen some people who can think like, okay, right here, right? Put my blinders. I see all this. I don't know what's going on out here though. So I think that's kind of important. And it is a good, I've always enjoyed the Vimy Ridge ever since my wife kind of guided me to the Canadian Embassy in DC back in the day.
So there's something key that I cut from this also, and it makes me think about that whole creative and critical thinking. When we think about, we've talked about multiple times, like the Jocko podcast, and one of the things he gets into in his books, and I think he talks about in 2 different books actually, and he talks about stepping back from the situation to observe it.
Yeah,
I feel like that's what they did. I think Byng and Currie did that. They stepped back from the situation they're about to get into, and they looked at it through open eyes of what could happen and they just kind of like redevelop this. And that, to me, that's critical. That is so critical,
Yeah.
because they're the figureheads. What happens, Ed, if that idea came from a private, right? And you had a stubborn senior. What if Byng was a stubborn senior and he wants to do it the traditional way? And Joe, who's, from, he's just a gunner. He's the lonely militia gunner.
Yeah.
He's over here saying, hey, if we did this, this, and this, couldn't it work like that? And then that senior official is like, no, we're doing it this way. You know what I mean? Like that's where that's that idea that we got to get into, and think, hey, there's ideas everywhere that work. So,
well, that's funny you say idea, Brian. I think our final point before we get into a little bit of a wrap up is going to talk about another one.
Oh yeah, we're talking about the another unprecedented step. Unprecedented step. I couldn't say it. Unprecedented. Byng and Currie took another unprecedented step in a war where maps were top secret documents only to be seen by high-ranking officers. They printed 40,000 maps and gave one to every soldier. At Vimy, every soldier knew his mission, and every soldier had a map. Like that.
Ooh, yeah, that's a risk.
That's great. That's a big risk. That's a huge risk. Because now my question, and I don't know the answer to this, is what was on those maps?
That would be the question.
What were Joe's out there writing out their plans on the map, and that way they knew, to help prepare for what was on them? What if the enemy got those maps?
Well, what the other thing you think about, Brian, with such a centralized type of command structure coming into this, right? Like, you don't need to know. Only these people need to know. Were the maps that big of a deal? Were they top secret really? Or was it just a matter of we only want certain people to have them, so they're top secret for that reason? So you got to kind of look at what they were talking about earlier with that. And I would hope the soldiers wouldn't be writing too much information on there, but it is good to, that visual, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, geez, land navigation, being able to say, okay, that's this on my map. That's that farm. That's that, that's that church right there. So I'm about right here. I know where I'm at. Like in the heat of battle, in the fog of war, being able to pull out a map and figure out where you're at probably felt pretty good. Probably helped morale. We talked about morale a little bit. Probably helped their morale. I mean, it depends on what made it top secret.
James, I feel like this right here, that this situation wasn't that I don't think they were just pulling out map. This is how I'm looking at it. By the way I'm seeing things by Byng and Currie, and the way they plan this, they're not the type that just planned it, had them rehearse a couple times and said, hey, rely upon your map. I'm pretty sure they run through the rehearsal so many times that everyone could probably count the steps they needed to take to get to the next objective.
Yep.
And then it was memorized, muscle memory. That's how we build muscle memory. And the map was a backup in case somebody forgot or messed up, or some leader went down and somebody has to take their place.
I mean,
I think that's what that was.
We said earlier there was a full-scale replica used, which we call a sand table, which is just a representation of the battle space to be able to understand how the movements are going to go and where you should be. And where, for this case, they were showing them, like, here's where we know the gunners are. We know there's a gun position here. We know there's one here. We know there's one here. Your team's taking this one, blah, blah, blah. So I think that there was so much rehearsal and training and practice going into it that was a big factor in the Canadians' success. I'd be interested to know how much of this did the Brits do? Did the Brits do any of it? Or did they stick to that? We need to know, you don't dig a trench, shoot, run out the trench, die. That's all we need you to do. Yeah,
I think you're right there. So, hey, let's why don't you bring us into that inspiring leadership wrap up piece, and then we'll just throw the questions out there at the end.
All right,
let's tie it all back.
All right. So this, I like this, and this was inspiring leadership, and I just kind of said, hey, this is going to be our wrap up right here for this episode. The Canadian victory at Vimy started at the leadership level. Byng and Currie were willing to break free from out-of-date thinking, embrace new ideas, learn from the successes and failures of others, and set up their people for success. So I think this is really going into that risk piece, right? When we were talking about, you were mentioning risk yes, man, we did a whole episode. Yes, I just had a brain fart. But anyway, we're talking about the risk associated with this operation. I think that's part of the risk is that they said, you know what? We're not doing it the old way. We're going to do something different. We're going to be bold. And, in the end, it worked out for Byng and Currie. They were bold, and the Canadians did something that hadn't been able to be done in 3 years previous.
To me, it's remarkable to learn about this and to understand it. And I can almost guarantee you, my friend, we have Army doctrine, we have DoD doctrine, we have all this stuff that supports this very idea and this creative thinking, this way of going that was not thought of before that. He brought something in, and this is no wonder why. Now I see why you said in the beginning, hey, this is why this guy is this important. And this is why this is a huge thing. And the Byng family and the whole name is a big thing with the Canadians. And then that whole Vimy Day, because it's a turn. It's a turn in thought process and philosophies and just all those things. So definitely, man, I'm very happy to have gotten to present this information because it really helps us look at, that's where that comes from. Sometimes, too many times we have people think, oh, where did that come from? Like, whoever came up with it. This right here, this is one of those things. It's like, that's where it came from. Somebody used all this stuff leap years before their time. That's where he was. Those two men. So we got some questions here, Ed, before we wrap it up. I think we just present these questions and let the listeners think about these questions themselves instead of discuss, because I feel like we answered the questions in our discussion.
We did well.
So the very first one is, are you open to new ideas? So those of you listening, just think of the words that I'm saying. I want you to think about what I'm bringing to you is these questions that if you can answer these questions, you may develop your organization. You may develop yourself, develop people, individuals. So think about that. Are you open to new ideas? What's your best new idea of the past 6 months? Is your company ingrained in an old pattern of thought that could be undermining its future? Is that, hey, we always did it this way mentality. When was the last time you introduced a bold new strategy? If you adopted Arthur Currie's neglect nothing philosophy, what area of your business would you focus on first? Think about the last 6 months. What successful actions do you want to repeat? What problem areas do you want to fix? What do you need to do to set your team up for success? And finally, does every team member have a clear view of the objective? Does every team member have a map to get there? That's great like questions.
I do like that.
Yeah. I know.
I really like that last one.
Yeah. And my question would be is like, what's your map? Show me your map. What's your map? What is it? What's going to bring you to success? And this was a good one, brother. I appreciate it. I'm glad you found this one and you just you developed the whole piece on this one. And it took a lot of stress off me this week. I had a lot of stuff that was going on. I was like, man, I'm glad he pieced this together because it was a good one. And it kind of reinvigorated that idea that, there's a lot of old stuff that we don't know about or we don't think about that brings us to the future, right? And it brings us to the way of thinking now. And are there things out there right now that people can do or will do or are doing that's going to change the way an industry runs, a military runs, things like that? So that's a good one, man. If we had somebody that wanted to find out more about this or us and they wanted to connect with us, right, James, if they wanted to get to know who Ed used to be and then finally now know who James is. Is there something that they could do or go?
Well, thank you for asking, Brian. I am glad that you asked. I can tell you what, hey, listeners, go out there, check us out. You can, first of all, let's start with YouTube. We are on YouTube, Instinctive Influencers Podcast on YouTube. Go on there, subscribe, give some thumbs up, right? Give some feedback, some input. Then from there, we encourage you to go to Facebook. Check us out on Facebook. We have a closed Facebook page. If you go on there, you click on the link for the Instinctive Influencers, you answer a few simple questions, and one of our dedicated staff will approve your entry into the Instinctive Influencers podcast. We ask you to be interactive, get in there, ask some questions, make some statements. What did you think of today's episode? What did you think of the last week's episode? What do you think of Brian? No. Well, yeah, it's good to know too.
Don't tell me that.
But yes, also check us out, Instinctive Influencers 101 Influence on Facebook, Instagram. Check us out on YouTube as well.
All right, man. Hey, good one. Thank you very much. Appreciate it, brother. You got any last final words you wanted to throw out there about this whole thing we laid out today?
I think we're good, Brian. I thought we did a good job. I was worried when we got it. I thought maybe it was going to go a little bit. It wasn't going to be as great as it was. I thought we did a great show, as we usually try.
No, my faith was completely in your ability to develop this. This is, I mean, there's this thing about it. You are the talent. That's normal. That's how I've been going about this the whole time. You're the talent that you're the voice. I'm just the guy that's over here running the production piece and just piecing together some outlines here and there. Today, you took on one more task that now I'm like, what was he going to need me for? He's not going to need me anymore. Like, get him a Rodecaster Pro, and next thing you know, he's producing his own stuff.
I need you.
All right, brother. Hey, great show. I got to figure out what button it is. Oh, it's that one right there.
Is that one there?
See, look, I'm lost without you. With that, my friend, I am Brian.
And I am the artist formerly known as Ed James.
And this has been the Instinctive Influencers Podcast. Thank you very much for listening. Have a great day.